Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. The story begins in the year AF 632, in a world where human civilization has been meticulously structured and conditioned to maintain order and stability. In this future society, the calendar no longer follows the birth of Christ, but is instead measured from the date. Henry Ford introduced the Model T, emphasizing the world's dedication to mass production and efficiency. London, now part of the world state, is a place where individuality and deep emotions have been sacrificed for the sake of collective happiness and social stability. Inside the towering Central London Hatchery and Conditioning Center, a group of students is led through the vast halls by the director of hatcheries and conditioning. The director, a man of authority and precision, explains the process by which human beings are no longer born naturally, but instead created in a laboratory through the Bokanovsky process. This method allows for the mass production of human beings, where a single fertilized egg can be split into as many as 96 identical embryos. The director takes pride in the efficiency of this process, stating that it ensures a perfectly structured society with each individual assigned a specific caste before birth. The castes, ranging from alphas to epsilons, dictate one's intelligence, occupation, and place in society. Alphas are the intellectual and physical elite, destined for leadership roles, while betas serve in administrative positions. Below them, the gammas, deltas, and epsilons perform increasingly menial tasks, with epsilons being conditioned to handle the most labor-intensive jobs without complaint. This rigid hierarchy is maintained through years of conditioning, ensuring that each individual not only accepts their predetermined role, but takes pleasure in it. As the students observe the hatchery's meticulous process, they are introduced to the concept of neo-Pavlovian conditioning. Infants are exposed to repeated stimuli to ensure they develop the appropriate preferences and aversions for their caste. A demonstration follows, where a group of Delta infants, clad in identical khaki uniforms, is placed in front of books and flowers. The moment they reach for them, a loud alarm blares and electric shocks jolt their tiny bodies. The children recoil in fear, forever associating books and nature with pain. The director explains that this conditioning prevents the lower castes from developing intellectual curiosity or a love for the natural world, which would distract them from their designated roles in the workforce. Meanwhile, hypnopedic conditioning, or sleep teaching, reinforces societal norms by whispering repeated phrases into the ears of sleeping children. These subconscious lessons shape their worldviews, instilling the belief that happiness comes from consumption, stability, and conformity. The world state's motto, community, identity, stability, is drilled into every mind from infancy, ensuring that each citizen embraces their role without question. As the tour continues, the students are introduced to Mustafa Mind, one of the 10 world controllers. Mind is a powerful and enigmatic figure who oversees the stability of this carefully controlled civilization. He possesses forbidden knowledge of the past, a time when people lived with emotions, family ties, and personal ambition. However, he he dismisses these concepts as outdated and inefficient, relics of a chaotic era before the advent of the world state. He explains that history, art, and deep human emotions have been sacrificed for universal happiness. There is no room for pain, suffering, or unpredictability in this society. Instead, citizens are conditioned to find pleasure in their assigned duties and to seek solace in the state-sanctioned drug, soma, which provides an instant escape from any lingering discontent. Through Min's words, the stark contrast between the old world and the new is made clear. In the past, people endured suffering, love, and the struggles of individual freedom. Now, stability is achieved through the eradication of these burdens. Science and technology have perfected a world where every human is engineered for a purpose, and no one steps out of line. While the majority of the population is content in this artificial happiness, there are those who subtly question the system. Among them is Bernard Marx, an alpha plus psychologist who feels alienated despite his elite status. Unlike his fellow alphas, Bernard is physically smaller and weaker, leading to whispers that something went wrong during his embryonic development. This perceived defect sets him apart, making him self-conscious and dissatisfied with the superficiality of his society. Unlike others who indulge freely in soma and mindless pleasures, Bernard longs for something deeper, though he struggles to define what that is. His closest friend, Helmholtz Watson, is also an alpha plus, but for entirely different reasons. Helmholtz is a gifted writer, yet he feels that his work lacks meaning. Despite being admired for his intelligence and physical perfection, he too senses a void within himself. Though he and Bernard share a dissatisfaction with the world state, their reasons differ. Bernard resents his physical shortcomings, while Helmholtz yearns for a greater purpose beyond the hollow pleasures provided by society. Bernard's isolation is further emphasized when he takes an interest in Lenina Crown, a beta woman who perfectly embodies the world state's ideals. Lenina is attractive, socially accepted, and follows the rules without question. She enjoys Bernard's company, but finds his unusual thoughts troubling. She cannot understand why he prefers solitude over social gatherings, or why he refuses to take soma to ease his anxiety. To her, Bernard's reluctance to fully embrace the world around them is confusing, even unsettling. Despite their differences, Lenina agrees to accompany Bernard on a trip to the savage reservations, a place outside the reach of the world state where people still live by old traditions. Unlike the engineered stability of their world, the reservation is home to natural-born humans who experience emotions, religion, and suffering. Bernard sees this trip as an opportunity to explore something beyond the confines of his conditioned reality, while Lenina views it as an exotic adventure, a temporary escape before returning to the comfort of her structured life. Before leaving, Bernard faces scrutiny from his superiors. The director of hatcheries, who has long disapproved of Bernard's nonconformity, warns him that his behavior is unacceptable. In a moment of unexpected vulnerability, the director reveals that he once visited the savage reservations himself in his youth, where he lost a woman he had been with. This unguarded confession surprises Bernard, revealing that even the highest ranks of society have moments of imperfection hidden beneath their rigid exteriors. With these tensions in place, Bernard and Lenina prepare for their journey, unknowingly setting the stage for revelations that will challenge everything they have been taught to believe. Bernard Marx and Lenina Crown set off on their journey to the Savage Reservation, a place unlike anything within the boundaries of the world state. Located in the harsh deserts of New Mexico, the reservation is home to people who still live according to old traditions, untouched by the rigid structures of the New World. For Lenina, the prospect of visiting such a place is both thrilling and unnerving, while Bernard sees it as an opportunity to understand something beyond the sterile and controlled environment of his own society. Their journey begins with a flight in a state-operated helicopter, soaring over vast landscapes that stretch beyond the familiar confines of their city. As they travel, Lenina takes Soma to ease her discomfort, unable to grasp why Bernard insists on experiencing the world without its numbing effects. Bernard, meanwhile, remains absorbed in thought, grappling with his own sense of isolation and dissatisfaction. Though he is an alpha plus, expected to thrive in the highest ranks of society, he feels increasingly alienated from those around him. His deep-seated insecurities, combined with his contempt for the shallowness of his world, drive him to seek meaning in the unknown. Upon arriving at the reservation, Bernard and Lenina are met by a warden who explains the primitive conditions of the place. Unlike the engineered perfection of the world state, the people here live among dirt, disease, and aging, things that have been entirely eliminated from Bernard and Lenina's reality. As they walk through the settlement, Lenina is horrified by what she sees: wrinkled elders, crying children, and people engaging in strange rituals that seem both violent and passionate. She struggles to comprehend a world where suffering exists, having been conditioned to believe that pain, aging, and strong emotions are unnatural and unnecessary. Amid their exploration, Bernard and Lenina meet a man unlike the others, a pale-skinned individual who speaks English. His name is John, and he introduces himself as someone born in the reservation, but not entirely of it. His mother, Linda, was once a citizen of the world state, but she was abandoned here many years ago. John, raised among the indigenous people of the reservation, has always felt like an outsider, belonging neither fully to their world nor to the one his mother often spoke of with longing. Linda's story is a tragic one. As she explains to Bernard and Lenina, she was once a beta assigned to a mission with the director of hatcheries. But during a visit to the reservation, she became separated from her group and was left behind. Pregnant and alone, she was forced to adapt to the harsh conditions of the reservation, where she gave birth to John. Unlike the children of the world state, who are engineered and conditioned to fit neatly into their assigned castes, John was born naturally, an experience his mother recalls with both horror and shame. In the world state, reproduction through pregnancy is considered obscene, and the very idea of motherhood is met with disgust. John, however, does not share his mother's bitterness. Though he struggles to fit in among the people of the reservation, he has found solace in literature, specifically in the works of William Shakespeare. A collection of Shakespeare's plays, discovered by chance, has shaped John's understanding of the world, filling his mind with grand ideas of love, honor, and individual destiny. He speaks in poetic phrases, often quoting passages from Hamlet, The Tempest, and Othello. trying to make sense of his place in the universe. His worldview is vastly different from that of Bernard and Lenina, who have been conditioned to reject deep emotions and artistic expression in favor of stability and pleasure. Bernard is fascinated by John, seeing in him a reflection of his own sense of alienation. John, too, feels an immediate connection to Bernard, recognizing in him a fellow outsider. As they talk, John expresses a deep yearning to see the world his mother always spoke of, a world of shining cities, advanced technology, and endless pleasures. For him, the world state represents something magical, a place where he might finally belong. Bernard, sensing an opportunity to challenge the very foundations of his society, decides to take John and Linda back to London with him. He sees John as a living contradiction, proof that life exists beyond the carefully maintained illusion of the world state. He believes that introducing John to society could serve as a way to expose its flaws, to reveal that the engineered happiness of his world is a fragile construct. However, his motivations are not entirely selfless. Bernard also hopes that by presenting John as a curiosity, he might gain influence and recognition among his peers, proving his worth to a society that has always treated him as an outsider. Before leaving, Bernard learns that his position in the world state is more precarious than he realized. The director of hatcheries, angered by Bernard's nonconformist behavior, has threatened to have him exiled to Iceland, a fate reserved for those who disrupt social order. Bernard, knowing that his only chance of survival lies in proving his value, sees John as his ticket to legitimacy. With this plan in mind, Bernard arranges for John and Linda to accompany him and Lenina back to London. John, filled with excitement and anticipation, prepares to enter a world he has only dreamed of, unaware that the reality awaiting him may be far different from what he expects. As their aircraft lifts off, leaving the rugged landscape of the reservation behind, John gazes out at the horizon, believing he is on the verge of something extraordinary. However, the journey he is about to embark on will challenge everything he has ever known, forcing him to confront the stark differences between his dreams and the cold, mechanical truth of the world state. John and Linda's arrival in London is met with immediate shock and curiosity. For the citizens of the world state, John is an unprecedented anomaly, a so-called savage brought from the reservation into the meticulously controlled world of order and stability. Linda, once a beta in this society, is no less shocking. Her aged and unkempt appearance stands in stark contrast to the eternally youthful and chemically maintained bodies of the world state citizens. Their arrival sets off a ripple of fascination, ridicule, and scientific intrigue. Bernard Marx, now basking in the attention brought by his discovery, parades John around like an exhibit. He invites the elite of London to witness the savage, allowing them to question him and observe his primitive ways. However, John is no mere spectacle. He carries with him the depth of human emotion and experience that the people of the world state have long forsaken. He speaks in Shakespearean verse, struggling to comprehend the shallowness of the people around him. Their obsession with Soma, their lack of familial bonds, and their casual attitudes toward relationships deeply unsettle him. Meanwhile, Linda, having spent years in the harsh conditions of the reservation, indulges heavily in soma upon her return, retreating entirely into a drug-induced haze. The citizens of the world state treat her with disgust, repulsed by her aging body and unkempt appearance. She, however, seeks nothing more than escape, and soma provides her with an endless reprieve from the pain of reality. Lenina Crown finds herself inexplicably drawn to John, though she does not understand why. Conditioned to view relationships as transient and purely physical, she is confused by John's notions of love, chastity, and honor. When she attempts to seduce him, John reacts violently, calling her impure and unworthy, echoing the tragic jealousy of Othello and the tormented passion of Romeo. His deep-seated belief in romantic love clashes painfully with Lenina's conditioning, highlighting the irreconcilable differences between their worlds. As John continues to navigate the world state, he grows increasingly disillusioned. He watches in horror as infants are conditioned to reject pain and suffering, as art and literature are sacrificed for stability, and as human connection is reduced to empty pleasure. The turning point comes when he is introduced to Mustafa Mind, one of the 10 world controllers. Mind, a man of great intelligence and authority, understands John's frustrations better than most. However, he defends the world state's sacrifices, arguing that stability, happiness, and social order are more valuable than individual freedoms or the pursuit of truth, and reveals that he has read forbidden literature, including the works of Shakespeare and religious texts. But he insists that such knowledge is dangerous. He explains that in order to maintain a perfectly stable society, the world state has eliminated the chaos of human emotion and intellectual pursuit. John, horrified, refuses to accept this worldview, realizing that the civilization he once dreamed of is nothing more than a gilded cage. As Bernard basks in the temporary glory of his association with John, he fails to see that his newfound popularity is fragile. Helmholtz Watson, his closest friend, also begins to feel drawn to John, not out of curiosity, but out of a genuine appreciation for his raw emotions and passion. Unlike Bernard, Helmholtz sees in John something he has always longed for, an intensity of feeling that has been stripped from his own existence. Their friendship begins to grow, forming a bond that challenges the very foundations of their world. But John's presence is a disruption, and disruptions are not tolerated in the world state. As he spirals further into frustration and despair, his fate becomes uncertain, and the consequences of his defiance loom ever closer. John's struggle is not merely his own. It is a battle between two irreconcilable ways of life, one that values comfort and control, and another that yearns for meaning and freedom, no matter the cost. John's presence in London continues to stir controversy. What initially seemed like a novelty, a savage plucked from the reservation and placed in the heart of civilization, has become a deeper, more troubling disruption. The people of the world state are captivated by John, but they do not understand him. He is paraded before audiences of curious onlookers who laugh at his old-fashioned ideals and peculiar speech. To them, he is an amusing spectacle, a relic of an obsolete past that holds no real value. But to John, everything about this society is abhorrent. He recoils from their obsession with pleasure, their their hollow relationships and their complete lack of suffering or struggle. Bernard, once an outcast, basks in his newfound popularity, delighted by the attention he receives as John's handler. He is invited to exclusive parties, showered with praise, and enjoys the company of beautiful women who once ignored him. However, his satisfaction is short-lived. John quickly tires of being treated as a curiosity and begins refusing to attend Bernard's social events. Without John's presence, Bernard is shunned once more. His artificial rise to prominence collapses, leaving him more bitter and resentful than before. Meanwhile, Helmholtz, Watson, and John form an unlikely friendship. Unlike Bernard, Helmholtz is drawn to John for his ideas rather than his novelty. The two spend hours discussing poetry, literature, and the meaning of existence. John shares passages from Shakespeare, which move Helmholtz in ways he has never experienced. The beauty of the words, the raw emotion, and the intensity of the ideas ignite something within him. Yet, he finds himself laughing at the notion of romantic love, unable to grasp why anyone would endure suffering for passion. John, offended, grows frustrated with Helmholtz's inability to understand deep feeling. And though they respect each other, their views remain fundamentally different. Lenina, on the other hand, is still drawn to John in a way she cannot comprehend. Used to casual relationships devoid of attachment, she expects him to desire her as all men do. However, John's upbringing on the reservation has instilled in him a rigid sense of morality and chastity. He idolizes Lenina, seeing her as a pure and virtuous figure. But when she makes advances toward him, he is horrified. He calls her a strumpet and recoils from her touch. Confused and hurt, Lenina does not understand why he refuses her, why he speaks of love and commitment as if they matter. To her, his emotions are foreign and incomprehensible. John's emotional turmoil deepens when he learns that his mother, Linda, is dying. Years of soma use have deteriorated her body beyond repair, and she now lies in a hospital bed, slipping in and out of consciousness. When John arrives to see her, he is appalled by the sterile, impersonal atmosphere of the hospital. There is no grief, no mourning, only efficient management of death. Children are brought in to be conditioned against any fear of mortality, encouraged to poke and laugh at Linda's withering form. Enraged, John lashes out, scaring the nurses and upsetting the children. As he desperately tries to reach Linda, she awakens briefly, but in her haze, she mistakes him for Pope, the man she once knew on the reservation. Her final words are not for her son, but for the past she never escaped. John, devastated, watches as she breathes her last breath. Overcome with grief, John collapses into despair. He has lost the only connection to his past, the only person who once tied him to something real. But in the world state, grief is not allowed. There is no room for sorrow, no place for longing. When a nurse sees John's distress, she offers him soma, urging him to take it and forget. Furious, he throws the pills away, refusing to numb his pain like the rest of society. But his actions do not go unnoticed. His rejection of soma, his violent outburst at the hospital, and his defiance of social norms mark him as a danger to stability. As John grapples with his sorrow, the divide between him and the world state becomes insurmountable. He cannot accept a world that erases suffering, that sacrifices meaning for comfort, that suppresses every genuine emotion in the name of happiness. His anger builds, and soon, his resistance will come to a head in ways that neither he nor the world state could have foreseen. John's grief over Linda's death fuels his growing disillusionment with the world state. The hollow, detached way in which people treat death horrifies him. There is no sorrow, no reverence for life lost, only the cold efficiency of a society that sees death as a mere process, managed and sanitized. The absence of mourning deepens his hatred for this world, a world where human emotion has been eradicated in favor of stability and control. In his eyes, true humanity has been sacrificed for an artificial, soulless existence. Still overcome by sorrow, John leaves the hospital and wanders the city in a daze, his thoughts consumed by loss and disgust. Everywhere he looks, he sees the same mindless faces, the same shallow pleasures, the same mechanical lives devoid of meaning. The sight of people numbed by soma enrages him. In a moment of defiance, he storms into a soma distribution center where workers are lining up to receive their daily doses. Overcome with anger, he shouts at them, calling them slaves, urging them to break free from their chemical chains. When his pleas are met with confusion, he grows violent, throwing the soma rations to the ground, trying to destroy them. His actions cause a riot, and the workers, suddenly faced with an absence of their beloved drug, descend into chaos. Bernard and Helmholtz are quickly summoned to the scene, and Helmholtz, despite his own doubts about the world state, jumps into the fray. Unlike Bernard, who hesitates in fear, Helmholtz instinctively supports John, fighting off the enforcers who attempt to subdue them. The riot is soon quelled, however, as reinforcements arrive and flood the area with soma vapor, pacifying the panicked citizens. Bernard, John, and Helmholtz are arrested and taken before Mustafa Mind, one of the world controllers. In Mind's private chambers, the three men face their judgment. Mind is not an unthinking enforcer of the world state's rules. He is intelligent and deeply knowledgeable. He understands exactly what John is rebelling against, but he does not see it as a mistake. Instead, he explains to John that the world state has deliberately eliminated suffering, instability, and individualism in order to create a society that functions efficiently. People do not need freedom, he argues. They need happiness, and happiness comes from predictability, from pleasure, from the absence of pain and strife. The world John longs for, with its passion, its struggle, and its depth of emotion, is not one that the world state can allow. John listens in horror as Mind reveals that he himself once pursued truth and intellectual freedom, only to realize that such pursuits threatened the stability of civilization. He had the choice to be exiled or to become a controller, and he chose power over personal fulfillment. He shows John forbidden books, including Shakespeare, the Bible, and philosophical works that have been banned for centuries. But he does not reveal them out of sympathy. He does so to prove his point. Beauty, tragedy, and art have been sacrificed for the greater good. Individual suffering has been removed, and with it, individual greatness. The cost of stability is the death of the human soul. Bernard, overwhelmed and terrified by the entire situation, begs for mercy, desperate to avoid exile. His cowardice disgusts both John and Helmholtz, but his pleas fall on deaf ears. Mind sentences Bernard and Helmholtz to exile on distant islands where other nonconformists are sent. Unlike Bernard, Helmholtz accepts his punishment with a calm, almost eager resolve. He sees the islands as a place where he might finally be free to write and think without constraint. Bernard, however, is dragged away in a fit of panic and despair. John is given a different fate and sees him as an experiment, a fascinating case study, a man raised outside of civilization, now forced to grapple with it. Rather than exile him, Ben decides to let him stay in the world state and observe what happens. John, however, wants no part of this twisted society. He refuses to remain in this world of synthetic pleasure and emotional emptiness. Desperate to escape, he flees the city, seeking solitude, seeking a way to reclaim the suffering that has been stripped from human life. He finds an abandoned lighthouse on the outskirts of civilization, a place where he can live in isolation, away from the sickening grip of the world state. There, he begins a new life, embracing self-discipline and suffering in an attempt to cleanse himself from the corruption he has witnessed. He prays, fasts, and punishes himself, hoping to rid his soul of the taint of this artificial world. But peace does not come easily. His presence does not go unnoticed, and soon, his solitude is disturbed by journalists and curious citizens who treat him as a spectacle once more. He has become entertainment, a new form of amusement for a society that knows no depth, no reverence. As John spirals deeper into his torment, his struggle against the world state reaches its tragic conclusion. The final act of his rebellion is yet to come, an act that will mark the true cost of a world without pain, without freedom, and without the raw, unfiltered reality of the human condition. John's retreat to the lighthouse represents his final attempt to reclaim some sense of purity, some version of reality that is not tainted by the artificial happiness of the world state. He throws himself into a life of asceticism, adopting self-discipline and suffering as a means of atonement for the corruption he believes has infected him. In solitude, he engages in rigorous self-flagellation, fasting and prayer, punishing his body to cleanse his soul. He grows thinner, his body weakened by hunger and the harshness of his self-imposed penance. But he believes that through suffering, he will rid himself of the contamination of civilization. He prays in solitude, chanting words that no one in the world state would understand. Words from Shakespeare, words of longing, pain, and truth. His isolation, however, does not last long. The citizens of the world state, ever hungry for novelty and distraction, are drawn to his plight. Reporters and onlookers soon gather at his lighthouse, turning his self-imposed exile into a grotesque spectacle. Helicopters hover overhead, cameras capturing his every move. People laugh as they see him beat himself, unable to grasp why anyone would willingly endure pain. His suffering is sensationalized, turned into yet another meaningless amusement for the masses. Some even begin mimicking his actions in a mockery of devotion, turning his torment into a form of entertainment. John's struggle with guilt and inner torment grows more intense as the public fascination with him escalates. Crowds flock to see the savage, watching in a mixture of horror and fascination as he whips himself in acts of self-purification. The world state's citizens, incapable of comprehending true suffering or remorse, find his actions inexplicably thrilling. His pain becomes entertainment, another form of sensation for a world that has long since abandoned the depth of real emotion. The media seizes upon his suffering, broadcasting images of his torment, turning him into an unwilling celebrity, an anomaly to be observed, but never truly understood. Even children are brought to see him, conditioned to laugh at his primitive behavior, reinforcing their belief in the superiority of the world state's ideals. As the pressure mounts, Lenina appears once more, bringing with her all the confusion and desire John has tried so desperately to purge. Her presence ignites the final conflict within him. She represents everything he both longs for and despises: love, physical attraction, and the shallow pleasures of the world state. When she approaches him, attempting to bridge the impossible gap between them, he is overwhelmed by conflicting emotions: lust, rage, self-loathing. In a fit of uncontrollable anguish, he lashes out, consumed by the intensity of feelings he cannot reconcile. The scene erupts into chaos, and the watching crowd, ever eager for sensation, misinterprets the violence as part of the spectacle. Their cheers and laughter grow louder, their excitement reaching a fever pitch as they watch the unfolding drama. To them, it is nothing more than another performance, another thrilling act in the grand stage of their engineered lives. The frenzy spirals into an uncontrollable orgy of hedonistic indulgence. Overcome by the pressures of society, by the weight of his own torment, and by the inescapable reality that he can never truly escape the corruption of the world state, John succumbs. He takes part in the debauchery, breaking his vow of purity, his final line of resistance shattered. The next morning, he awakens with a profound sense of shame. The realization that he has betrayed himself, that he has become part of the very world he loathed, is unbearable. He remembers every detail with excruciating clarity: the touch of hands, the heat of bodies, the overwhelming sensation of losing himself to the mindless pleasure he had fought so hard to resist. He staggers outside, feeling defiled, broken beyond repair. In his last act of defiance, John takes the only path he believes is left to him. He retreats once more into the lighthouse, but this time, it is not for purification, it is for escape. The world that has mocked and tormented him, that has turned his suffering into amusement, will never allow him peace. The final image of John's rebellion is a tragic one, unable to reconcile the existence of a world without true suffering and meaning. He ends his own life. His body is discovered hanging in the lighthouse, a silent testament to the unbearable weight of a world devoid of genuine humanity. The very crowds that had gathered to witness his suffering now come to see his corpse, murmuring in vague curiosity before quickly losing interest. The cameras capture his lifeless form, the news spreads, but it is soon replaced by newer, more exciting distractions. With John's death, the cycle is complete. The world state continues, unchanged and unshaken. The citizens who once flocked to see him quickly move on to the next distraction, the next novelty. His story, his suffering, and his desperate attempt to cling to something real are reduced to just another forgotten curiosity in a world where nothing truly matters. The tragedy of John the Savage is that his pain, his love, his rage, all the things that made him human, are rendered meaningless in a society that has eradicated meaning itself. In the end, his resistance is nothing more than an anomaly, an oddity to be studied and dismissed, leaving behind no lasting impact on the sterile, indifferent world that crushed him. With John's tragic fate sealed, the world of the world state carries on as if nothing has changed. The the social order remains intact, unshaken by the brief and painful anomaly of the savage. For the people of this engineered civilization, emotions, tragedy, and suffering are distant, incomprehensible relics of a past they have been conditioned to dismiss. Bernard and Helmholtz, once outliers themselves, have now fully resigned to their fates. Bernard, unable to endure the shame and rejection he faced after his brief taste of social elevation, is exiled to an island where those who fail to conform are sent. Unlike John, he does not choose rebellion or defiance. Instead, he pleads desperately for a second chance, for reinstatement in a world that had never truly accepted him. His breakdown, his desperate begging for mercy, only serves to reinforce how deeply ingrained the world state's control is. Those who cannot conform must be cast out, not as punishment, but simply as a practical necessity to maintain stability. His final moments in the novel are filled with humiliation, a stark contrast to the fleeting sense of superiority he once enjoyed. In his exile, Bernard will have to confront the reality that he was never truly an individual, merely a defective cog in the well-oiled machine of the world state. Helmholtz Watson, however, accepts his exile with quiet dignity. For him, the island is an opportunity rather than a punishment, a place where free thinkers and nonconformists reside, where he might finally create something meaningful. He is sent to the Falkland Islands, where he hopes that the raw, untamed nature of the place will stir within him the creative fire that had been dulled in the sterile world of the world state. Unlike Bernard, Helmholtz is at peace with his fate, understanding that true freedom can only be found outside the suffocating comfort of civilization. He knows that real emotion and artistic expression require suffering, and for the first time in his life, he embraces the uncertainty of what lies ahead. Meanwhile, Mustafa Mind, the powerful and enigmatic world controller, resumes his duties as if nothing unusual has occurred. His conversations with John had momentarily stirred within him the distant echoes of a life he once abandoned, but he long ago accepted the trade-off. He understands that civilization's survival depends on absolute control, on the sacrifice of art, love, and true individuality for the sake of universal stability. For Mind, there is no regret, only the satisfaction of maintaining order. He keeps a collection of forbidden books, Shakespeare, the Bible, old philosophical texts, not out of rebellion, but as a reminder of the things the world state has willingly discarded in exchange for happiness. He alone bears the weight of knowledge, aware of the things his people will never experience. And yet he remains unwavering in his belief that this is the best of all possible worlds. The citizens of the world state, oblivious to John's suffering and death, continue their existence without change. Summer rations are distributed as usual, orgy-porgies persist, and hypnopedic conditioning keeps minds in line. No one questions, no one mourns, and no one remembers. John's death is nothing more than a brief scandal, a momentary distraction before the next source of amusement takes its place. The system is flawless, designed to absorb and erase anomalies without ever truly being affected. In a world where discomfort is eliminated, where even the concept of grief has been replaced by chemical suppression, nothing truly matters. The people do not even realize what they have lost, because they were conditioned never to know it in the first place. The novel closes on this haunting realization that the world state, in its relentless pursuit of stability and pleasure, has succeeded in creating a world free of conflict, but also stripped of meaning. True art, love, passion, and sacrifice are relics of the past, and those who seek them are either exiled, destroyed, or assimilated. The price of utopia is the death of the soul, and in this new world, that is a price everyone is expected to pay. The citizens, perfectly content in their ignorance, have no reason to resist. They are, in their own way, happy, if happiness can be defined as the absence of suffering rather than the presence of fulfillment. With Bernard and Helmholtz gone, with John dead, and with the world state functioning as ever, the cycle continues unbroken. The controllers will continue to mold the future, and the citizens will continue to live out their engineered lives in contented ignorance. And so, the story of the savage, like so many before him, fades into nothingness, another lost soul swallowed by the machine of civilization. The world moves forward, indifferent, unshaken, eternal in its carefully curated emptiness. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World is a chilling vision of a future where technological advancement and social conditioning have created a world of stability and pleasure, but at the cost of individuality, freedom, and meaning. Through its characters, setting, and dystopian themes, the novel raises profound questions about the nature of happiness, control, and the human experience. The world state is a society engineered for perfect stability, where everything is carefully controlled to prevent conflict or unhappiness. People are genetically designed for specific societal roles, conditioned from birth to accept their place, and pacified through constant consumption, entertainment, and the drug soma. While this has eliminated war, poverty, and suffering, it has also erased passion, art, love, and intellectual curiosity. The novel questions whether a world without suffering is truly desirable if it comes at the cost of what makes us human. The relentless pursuit of a painless existence has turned society into a place where people are content, but lack true joy or self-awareness. The sacrifice of individuality for the sake of order ultimately diminishes the richness of human experience, leaving behind a hollow shell of civilization that merely functions, but does not truly live. From the moment they are born, citizens of the world state are conditioned through sleep, teaching hypnopedia and repetitive slogans to accept their roles and desires as natural. Individual thought and dissent are nearly impossible because people have been trained to never want anything outside their predetermined existence. This highlights the power of social and psychological conditioning in shaping human behavior and suppressing free will. The complete eradication of independent thought ensures that society remains docile and unchallenged. A well-oiled machine where individuals no longer question their reality. The implications of such control are terrifying, suggesting that a society can be manipulated into not only obedience, but complete acceptance of their own oppression. Huxley presents a world where people are encouraged to constantly consume and seek pleasure. Old age, emotional depth, and long-term commitments are seen as outdated and undesirable. Soma, the perfect drug, ensures that no one ever has to feel discomfort, sadness, or dissatisfaction. This extreme focus on pleasure over depth warns of a future where human fulfillment is reduced to mere distractions and temporary pleasures rather than genuine experiences and relationships. The concept of happiness in the world state is one of shallow amusement rather than true fulfillment. Love, artistic struggle, philosophical exploration. None of these have a place in a society where even the smallest hint of distress must be eliminated. True human connection is sacrificed for hedonistic satisfaction, leaving behind a populace that is pacified but never truly alive. Mustafa Mend, one of the world controllers, represents the rationalization of control in the name of societal happiness. He openly admits that books like Shakespeare and the Bible contain beauty and truth, but insists that they are incompatible with a stable society. Knowledge is tightly controlled because true understanding and free thought lead to unrest. The novel raises the question, is it better to be ignorant and happy or aware and discontented? Men's acceptance of the trade-off suggests that leaders of the world state understand the cost of their decisions, but believe it to be necessary. He embodies the idea that knowledge and stability cannot coexist in a society designed to be free of turmoil. His character forces the reader to consider whether ignorance is truly bliss or simply a means of avoiding the discomfort of reality. Characters like John the Savage, Bernard Marx, and Helmholtz Watson struggle with different forms of imprisonment: physical, psychological, and intellectual. John, raised outside the world state, seeks a life of meaning, suffering, and personal choice, only to find himself trapped in a society where true freedom is impossible. Bernard briefly rebels, but ultimately craves acceptance, while Helmholtz embraces exile in pursuit of creative expression. Their struggles emphasize the importance of true freedom, which includes not just the ability to act, but the ability to think and feel deeply. John's ultimate rejection of the world state, followed by his tragic fate, underscores the deep incompatibility between the human spirit and a world where all pain and struggle have been removed. His longing for something greater, something meaningful, is what makes him the most human character in the novel, and his story serves as a heartbreaking reminder of what is lost when a society prioritizes comfort over truth. The people of the world state do not experience deep emotions, genuine love, or meaningful relationships. Family, motherhood, and strong attachments have been abolished because they are seen as threats to stability. Even death is treated as a meaningless process, stripped of grief or significance. Huxley warns of a world where the very things that define human existence, struggle, passion, sacrifice, are systematically eliminated in favor of comfort and order. The novel highlights the fragility of human culture and the ease with which society can be reshaped into something unrecognizable when comfort and control become the highest priorities. In removing emotional depth and personal attachments, the world state has created a society of functionally content individuals who are, in reality, deprived of the very essence of what makes life meaningful. The novel suggests that any attempt to create a perfectly controlled and harmonious society will always come into conflict with human individuality. John represents the ultimate outsider, someone who values personal experience, literature, and the freedom to choose, even if it means suffering. His tragic fate underscores the incompatibility between true individuality and a world designed to suppress it. The contrast between his worldview and that of the world state is stark, making his suffering all the more poignant. His desperate attempts to cling to something real, whether through self-denial, Shakespeare, or love ultimately end in despair, showing how deeply incompatible the human soul is with a world that does not allow for struggle or growth. Brave New World remains one of the most relevant dystopian novels of all time. It serves as a warning against the dangers of unchecked technological and social engineering, reminding us that true fulfillment comes not from comfort alone, but from the complexities of human existence. It challenges us to consider what we truly value in life: stability or freedom, pleasure or meaning, conformity or individuality. In the end, Huxley leaves us with a haunting question: what price are we willing to pay for a world without pain? The novel serves as a mirror, forcing us to reflect on our own society and the ways in which we may already be sacrificing our freedoms in exchange for convenience and pleasure. It warns that the erosion of individuality does not happen overnight, but through slow and subtle shifts in values and priorities. As technology continues to advance, and society moves closer to the kind of engineered stability that Huxley imagined, his message remains as urgent as ever. The novel does not merely serve as a cautionary tale. It is a call to remain vigilant, to question the forces that shape our lives, and to fight for the richness of human experience in all its painful, messy, and beautiful complexity.